Welcome. Thanks for joining me today for Outdoor Classrooms Without Overwhelm. My name's April Zyko, and I am a nature-based educator based in Vermont. And I, over the last 13 years, have been supporting other educators who have this desire to bring nature into the heart of their curriculum and who want to develop an outdoor classroom that really supports children. And a lot of times these folks don't know where to start. So likely, if you're watching this video, you too are interested in developing an outdoor classroom. And so we're going to jump right in. My name is April Zyko. My master's degree is in education from the University of Virginia, and my focus was curriculum and instruction. And I started my career 23 years ago as a pretty traditional public school teacher. But right from the start, I realized as a first grade teacher, why are we teaching science with a workbook indoors when we have this beautiful natural beauty right outside that we could take the children to? So rather than learning about plants in a workbook, we could go outside and experience plants and grow plants. And so over my journey as an early childhood educator, I've really leaned into the idea of really thinking about how I bring nature into my teaching. And then about 13 years ago, I started to support other educators, both through teaching workshops and professional development series, and also college courses, specifically in early childhood, but also in nature-based approaches, and really thinking about how we can bring nature into our classrooms and to really tap into all of the things that nature can provide for both us as adults as well as for our children. So why call this workshop outdoor classroom? I could have called it, the playground or the outdoor space, or, whatever terms you use for your outdoor space. We could have called it that. But I like to really communicate the value of the time that we're spending outside as equally valuable as the time that we spend inside. So when I use the term outdoor classroom, I feel like I'm communicating to my stakeholders the importance of the time that we spend outdoors. It is part of our curriculum. It's not just an add-on or something that's kind of fun to do. But rather that it's really part of my approach to teaching. And so the educators that I support primarily are early childhood educators, meaning serving children birth through age 8, or birth through grade 3 here in the United States. And an outdoor classroom really can, if it's designed intentionally, it can support children. And I like to think about really taking the overwhelm out of this process, because oftentimes you can feel like, I don't even know where to begin. I see these beautiful spaces. Maybe you've spent some time on Pinterest. Maybe you even created a Pinterest board where you're pinning all these gorgeous things that you want to have. Maybe you've looked at really expensive catalogs because this nature-based approach is being recognized and being marketed to now. And so you might look at a catalog and see, a beautiful mud kitchen and think, oh, in order to have a mud kitchen, I need to buy this beautiful thing that's over $1,000, when in fact, it doesn't have to be. And so today, my focus in this training really is about empowering you with the skills for effective outdoor learning and really thinking about practical and relevant ideas that you can take action with. You don't have to wait until you have it all figured out. And so I highly encourage you to think about what you call your space and then jump in with some imperfect actions to make the space supportive to the children that you work with. So I teach a larger course on this topic. It's actually a college course that I teach for undergraduate and graduate level students through Vermont State University's Center for Schools. And in that larger course, I'm kind of taking like the best little bits and popping it into this 30-minute training as part of this awesome summit that we're doing here in January. But where I like to begin is right here. What's your why? Why do you want to do this? Why do you find that it's important for having an outdoor classroom? And I encourage you to really take the time to write down your why, so that you can think through it. And when we do a reflective practice about why we do what we do, particularly with actual paper and an actual pen and writing it down, we get a lot of clarity for our own selves. And we gain a lot of confidence in how we talk about what we do with our stakeholders. So, whether that's the families that you serve, your administrator who may or may not be on board with this idea of what you want to do, your community members, but really getting clear about what's your why, what's most important for you. And I hope in this 30 minutes that we have together that you leave, like, what's my why for this session is empowering you with the skills for effective outdoor learning. And so I just love the idea of taking all of this research that I've done, including working with literally well over 1,000 other educators, and boiling it down to what's most important. But don't skip this step, because if you skip figuring out what's your why, then you might never feel like you have really developed the outdoor classroom that's right for you, or that serves the children that you are working with. So what's your why? And I can tell you, some people's why, they just want a great gross motor space that kids can be really active. They can get their energy out. They can move their body. They can challenge their body. They can take healthy risks. Some people say, you know what? I really want more of a naturalized space. I want to increase the biodiversity so that my children are noticing the plants and the animals. More birds are coming to our space because we have planted things that are of interest to them. The pollinators are there. We have this, we're bringing in nature into our outdoor space. Even if we're in a small fenced in area, what we're wanting to increase the biodiversity, or we're wanting kids, to have their hands in the soil and doing some gardening. Maybe your why is that you just really want kids to be creative in their building. You want them to be problem solvers, and you're deciding, I want kids to be thinking outside of the box. I want to have lots of different loose parts and materials because I want their curiosity and their creativity to just be sparked. Now, you might want to do all three of those things, and I know that I'm the type of person who wants to do all three of those. But when you can boil it down to just one, or just one that you're going to start with, it helps you to get more clarity and more focus in what you're going to do, rather than having like this whole barrage of ideas and never getting started. So what's your why? Figure that out and write it down. Now, you can go out and you could be looking in lots of different places for the information that you need for this. But I really encourage you, rather than looking far and wide and searching the internet and pinning thousands of different things, or looking at lots of different catalogs, that just becomes really overwhelming. And you can get stuck in that analysis paralysis, that you're just looking at everything and not actually taking action. So I want you to think about, what are the action steps that I'm going to do as a result of this workshop? And so for me and my why in this session, like I said, empowering educators with the skills for effective outdoor learning. And that could be your life. I feel like that's my life's work. I feel like that's a huge body of information that I share with other educators, but it all, I feel like, gets started by just stepping out the door and taking kids outside. So the benefits of outdoor learning, we could spend a huge amount of time here, but I encourage you to look at this resource. And I am going to have a toolkit that goes along with this training. And right in the toolkit, you can find this link to, it was put together, it's by the Peers Associates. And what it is it's a research summary of more than 50 articles. So this organization took 50 research articles and summarized it down into the benefits of outdoor nature-based play and learning. And they summarized like this huge body of research of 50 articles down into about an 8-page article. Highly encourage you to read that. It's an excellent read to feel empowered about why is this important and what's the value in it. It's an excellent resource to kind of take little bits of information and drip that out to your currently enrolled families to say, oh, the cognitive benefits of playing outside, and sharing a little bit of information about there. actually being outside improves academic performance, and share some of the research and resources that are in there. This social development, my goodness, we see such a change in children who sometimes in the indoor classroom really struggle. They go outside and they thrive. They become a leader amongst their peers. The mental and emotional health, now more than ever, we know that children are struggling, with some pretty intense things, both through trauma and, adverse experiences. It's healing to be outside. We can really improve their mental health by spending daily time outside, as well as their physical health. We need our kids to be moving. Our young children have increased risks of cardiovascular challenges, asthma, other health, really health conditions that we didn't see until, into young adulthood. Very young children are having it, and we have an obesity crisis. And so when we think about the benefits of being outside and the way that we're active and we're moving, huge benefits to their physical health. And then, you know, uh, the last one here, the stewardship and sense of place, is so important. Our kids now more than ever are living a very indoorized life. And because they're spending so much time inside, they have this disconnect from nature. And so thinking about how creating an outdoor classroom can help them feel a connection to nature, to notice the seasons, to begin to love this place. It's not uncommon for me when I first take my preschoolers outside when they're new into my program, that they'll see a daddy long legs and go, "Oh no, a daddy long legs," and they want to start stomping on it. Or same thing with a worm. It's like, "Oh, it's disgusting. I'm gonna kill it." And it's like, that's what they've been modeled, and that's what they've seen maybe in their experiences up to this point. And so I don't come at them with a sense of shame or, what you're doing is wrong, but rather helping them to connect to this place and to help understand our role as a steward. And when we look at some of the current research about people who go into careers or who have a very environmental identity and environmental ethic, they as children spend increased amount of times outside. So huge amount of benefits for outdoor learning, and we could spend a lot of time unpacking this. But the best resource that I have found is this article, which is the research summary, and it'll be in the toolkit. And if you're thinking about writing some grants, this is a great reference for you to be able to pull some language out about why you're doing what you're doing and having some evidence to back up why this is important for children. So the other thing that I like to think about is how we can use storytelling to get supporters. Now, if you're an early educator, you probably are used to telling stories to the children or reading stories to children. But when we begin to really want to let other people know about why we do what we do, I think sharing the story of what we do is really important. And so the way this might look, this is connected to the why, when you figured out your why. So let me take if your why was that part about wanting to get kids active, you might have a story that you tell supporters. This is a story you might share when you're at the grocery store, or it's a story you might share when you're talking to your neighbors or small business owners or community members. You would come up with a story connected to that why. And so it'd be something like, how children are spending so much more time inside and it's really negatively impacting their health. We are seeing this rise in children with serious health conditions and because of the obesity. Well, what I found is that creating this outdoor classroom is helping my children to become more active, to love to move their bodies. And I'm working on developing this space so that they can move their bodies and challenge themselves and take healthy risks. And so one of the things that I'm working on in my classroom or in my school is increasing the amount of space that we have for our outdoor classrooms. And then you can go on to tell them about your space and tell them about the things that you're hoping to create for your children. Storytelling is really powerful, and it can feel really overwhelming to think about how do we get support from other people. but it's not overwhelming to tell our story. And so having your why and then kind of practicing this storytelling aspect with these two little prompts, it can really help your community understand what you do and can really help you get support for what you're doing. I live in Vermont, and weather is a really hard challenge that we have here. And so oftentimes many of the educators, particularly the educators that I work with in the New England states, talk about the logistical challenges of wintertime. And it is really hard, but we have resources to help support us. And so, when we're thinking about what are we getting overwhelmed with, weather is one of the real challenging ones. And it's not to make light of it. It is challenging. There are days that it's hard to get out there. But when we think about our challenges and think about how we're preparing to overcome those challenges, so for me, really being ready for the challenges of weather, particularly winter weather, it's about getting parents on board so that we have the gear that we need, helping to communicate to them, why do we go outside when it's cold? It's so important that we have strategies to inform people about why we're doing what we do and to be ready to take action. So if I waited until the first snow that we had to go, oh dear, I have 15 preschoolers and I don't have the gear that I need, yeah, I would feel really overwhelmed. But if I started this process early and said, okay, I need this amount of gear to have extra things for my classroom, and I came up with strategies about how I was going to do that, then it wouldn't be as overwhelming. And so in the toolkit, I'm going to share a resource about getting gear donations, because that to me was one of the biggest obstacles that I faced. Weather's not the biggest challenge of all people, but oftentimes lack of funds. So that you have this vision of what you want to create, but you don't have the money to create it. I just encourage you not to wait until you have all of the money you need, but rather take that imperfect action and get started. And then another topic that we're going to cover today is also just thinking about safety and how do we keep our children safe. And most of us, particularly if we're working in regulated programs, we do have licensing regulations that we have to follow. And those are different for each of the states. Those of us here in the US, every state has different licensing regulations, and so that can feel really challenging. But when we educate ourselves about those licensing standards and make sure that we're doing what we need to, and if we have questions, we're calling our licensor. Here in Vermont, it's called Licensor on Duty, and we can call this number and get the support that we need. So looking at those obstacles and thinking about ways that we can overcome it. The reality is many of you may have very small spaces that look more like this. It's a fenced in area, it's really small and it's tight. There's lots of plastic, there's lots of bright primary colors. And what I like to think about is don't let the distraction of Pinterest and perfect spaces stop you from doing this important work. Rather, start where you are. If this is what your space is right now, that's totally fine. A real focus, I think, is incorporating nature and hands-on learning opportunities. And so if we went back to this picture, this is the outdoor classroom in my public school. I'm a public school preschool teacher part-time, and this is one of the outdoor classrooms that we've developed. Well, I have an advantage in that I work at a school where they value outdoor education. We have systems in place for our classroom teachers to have nature immersion experiences. And so this didn't happen overnight. It took time and it took advocacy. But even when I have taught in spaces that looked more like this, I was able to incorporate nature and hands-on learning opportunities because I was bringing materials in, and I was bringing loose parts in, or I was looking in my own backyard or in my own community and going and gathering things that I wanted us to have to experience. And so don't let yourself be limited to think, oh, I can't do that because I don't have, this beautiful forested space and it has to look such and such. Not at all. The educators that I work with, most of them are more traditional educators who work in childcare centers or who work in public schools, and they're figuring out ways in order to make it work. And one of the strategies that I think is, you know, just start and bring some materials in. And I know that sounds really sort of simplistic and Pollyanna, but use what you have. Maybe eventually you will have the funds so that you can switch some of the materials so that they're a little bit more naturalized. And maybe you'll just continue to have plastic things, and that's okay too. I think that we can really do a lot with the spaces that we have, but sometimes we just get stuck in that place of like, oh, I can't do it because this is where I work. If I was working in a forest school, or if I was working in a nature-based preschool, it would look different. No, every child deserves to have nature as part of their education, and so you can do so much in the spaces that you are. This is my you saw the forest classroom, and then this is the courtyard classroom in my public preschool program that I teach in. And it's a really beautiful space, but it's actually really simple. We have several garden beds, raised beds that the children help to plant and help to tend. We have climbing stumps that are over here. We have a sandbox that was recently put in that's here, some more climbing area. I have a little storage bin here, and then another one that you'll see in another picture. And I have to clean up and put everything away every day at the end of our time using it, because it is what it is. And I'm in a public school. It's a shared public space that community members come to on the weekends. And so, there's parts of me that are like, oh, I want, to be able to have it look a little more wild or have more things. But at the end of the day, we clean things up and we put them back into the storage, and so we make it work. But what I love is that even in this kind of space, I can foster a love for nature. On the day that we took this picture, we had gotten outside and it was not raining, but the storm was rolling in and the clouds were really quite, dark and mysterious. And the colors of the maple tree that's here near the bench, this was, it was like a glow. And we got outside, and I work with 3 to 5 year olds, and one of the kids just made everybody stop and went, oh, and it was such a beautiful moment and such a simple moment. But the first child really was witnessing and noticing nature. And I just thought, wow, that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't put the time and energy in to doing some of the activities that we do to help kids foster this love of nature. So another huge stumbling block or challenge that educators find is really thinking about safety and outdoor classrooms. Now, safety really is number one. Kids are coming to us, and we know that we are there to protect their health and their safety. And so we want them to be able to take have challenges and to be able to take healthy risks. But as we design spaces, we do know that we need to make sure that they're inclusive for any child or family. And so they have to be ADA, American Disability Act, compliant. And that is important because we want this space to work for all children and all families. And even if you don't currently have a child who needs special accommodations, we want a universal design so that it would work for them, work for any child that we may have in the future. High quality often is perceived as purchasing a very expensive metal or plastic structure. So if you have bought for your program, one of these large structures, you know the investment that you're making in it. They're really expensive. And so sometimes when we don't have those kinds of equipment, families might have questions, and they might think, is this a quality space for my child to be in? And so it is important to be able to communicate what we do in our spaces. Also, we need to meet the playground safety standards. depending if you're in regulated care, if you're in a licensed program, you have to comply also with your child care regulations. Those are different from state to state. But in general, there might be other guidelines as well. And that could be from your school or your program's liability insurance. Here, every 3 years, our liability insurance, the insurer comes out and inspects our spaces. And so we need to make sure that we're in line with that. You also need to make sure that you align with the vision of the school. And, if the school has a particular aesthetic that it's working on, that they want it to look neat and tidy. So like in my case, I have to clean up those things before or when we are done. We have to make sure we're meeting with that as well. And some of you might still be using tools such as, environmental rating scales like IDERS or ECHRS or FECHRS. And if you are required to have use those tools, then you would want to be looking at your space through that lens as well. And so this can be a huge overwhelm. But what I encourage you to do is to read and to seek support. One of the ways that you can get support, I run a Facebook group, which I have listed at the end of this, but it's called Nature Inspired Teacher. And so oftentimes we have people in our Nature Inspired Teacher Facebook group, which is completely free, but they'll post things and say, this is the space that I have, and I want to make it a little bit safer. Can I get some input or support for it? Okay. Initiating small changes can break through the status quo and create momentum for change. Success breeds success. Immediate small steps require little planning, no approval of others, or no money, and they can be implemented right away. These are the kinds of things where you can take action. And so that quote comes from Eric Nelson. His book is called Cultivating Outdoor Classrooms, and the page number is even there for you. But I love this idea of thinking, what can we do that we can feel empowered to take action right away? And so this photograph is a picture of a bean trellis where you could grow beans up it, and you can create it as a little hideaway space. And so I love this as a first step for people. This is a project you can do for $20, maybe even less. If you already had instead of purchasing bamboo poles, if you wanted to harvest some saplings from a forest that you had permission to harvest saplings from, you can make this for even less than $20. But think of the play potential that we have with a structure like this. Something similar to this would also to create a sunflower house. Those take a little bit more time to grow out than this does, but this is a perfect project to do in the springtime. Another super quick and simple way to bring something interesting in, find someone who can donate some stumps to you. Stumps should be free. Do not spend money on stumps. Somebody somewhere nearby you has a dead tree that they're cutting down, or maybe not even a dead tree, but a tree that needs to be cut down, or maybe there was a tree that got blown down by a storm. Find someone who would cut some stumps for you and put them in your space. Look at your licensing regulations and know how many inches tall. Like here in Vermont, if it's less than 30 inches, we don't have to have mulch or a surface cushioning under it. And so having short stumps could be a great jumping in place for little to no money. Creating a space that has seating. I love having outdoor circle time. And this was on the day that the materials were delivered. I was talking with this picture was taken quite a few years ago, but I was talking with a first grade teacher, and I was telling her my vision, and I think that's really important that we share what we're hoping to do. And as I was describing it, she was like, "Oh, I can get that for you. My husband could make that." And I was like, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah, he'll drop it off. When do you want it?" And a week later, he rolls up in his pickup truck with the materials that I wanted. And it's just so encouraging to know that when we feel comfortable to ask for support, that there's people there who are willing to support us. So if I was going to suggest, and from working with a bunch of educators, these are the areas where I would probably start. Having a digging area, having something for storage is important. Having a mud kitchen, so much learning and fun and engaged play happens in the mud kitchen. I like having seating because it is nice to have adult size seating so we can sit and comfort a child, connect to a child if we need to, and for children to be able to sit and connect with each other. Having some work surfaces, that's a little bit more maybe for older children, or if you're in planning on doing, some art projects outside. So having picnic tables or some other work surface, and then shade and shelter adds to the comfort because when we're creating outdoor classrooms, we want to create spaces that are really comfortable for children. So this is a same space, but zoomed out a little bit. One of the favorite spots in my outdoor classroom is this digging bed. And because I'm in a school calendar, we start at the end of August and we finish in June. We do grow things in there in the summertime. If I was a year-round program, I would just leave this as a digging bed. But the kids just love to dig and discover. This year we planted potatoes, and so right before we left for summer break, we planted potatoes, and when we came back, the potatoes were ready for harvest. What a magical experience of harvesting potatoes. Kids just loved it. It was like a treasure hunt. So having a digging area is important. Having a storage area. Now, this is storage is expensive, especially if you're looking at wood, wooden ones or ones that are, a little bit more permanent structures. This is a Rubbermaid brand one, both this one and that smaller one that was over by the sandbox area. But having storage really adds to the ease of being able to teach outside. I do what I call grab and go curriculum kits, and I store my curriculum kits in here. And so I do have a balance structure between just outdoor free play, child-led, play-based, and I do have some more structured activities for kids. And those kits I just keep in there, and I rotate them through with materials that I already have, maybe materials that most teachers would just use in their indoor classroom, but with some thought and having these grab and go kits, really, really makes it so that I can implement curriculum just as easily outside. Um, Sand is, to me, just, I would have loved to have an even bigger sandbox, but this is what was donated to my outdoor classroom, so it's a jumping in place. But having that digging area that is in that raised bed that I just showed, and having a sandbox, I think is just fantastic. We keep the sand toys and digging tools and things in this smaller little trunk of a storage area, so that's really easy to pull things out and to put them back away. I mentioned seating. This is the current seating that we have in our outdoor classroom. This is a metal bench that we purchased. It's actually a bench in memory of a very important person. And it's in honor of someone. And so it has a really special meaning to us, but just having seating is really important. We do also have stumps that could be seating, but this is what I think of mostly as our seating area. This is in a different program, but I love a big sand digging area. I just find that it's really engaged, and I like to keep it covered with a contractor grade tarp so that our little neighborhood cats are kept out of it. In our state, it's not a regulation that we have those, but I do think it's hygienic, and I think it's a good system. We already mentioned the bench. Mud kitchens can look like all different kinds of things. And like I said earlier, it could be, something really expensive that you purchase, or it could be some materials that you go to the thrift store or ask for donations, and it can be kept really quite simple. Our mud kitchen turns into a snow kitchen. Mud kitchens can be really simple with smaller amounts of materials. It will look nice and tidy like this when we bring it out, and it will last just a few minutes, and then everything is spread out everywhere. And that's how we want it to be. We want children to be playing with the materials. So even though we have pictures like this that look so beautiful, it's just when we first have set things up, and then yes, the materials get mixed together and such. Natural materials are wonderful to add to the mud kitchen or the snow kitchen, and if you don't have a lot of natural materials in your current play space, use your own backyard or go for a walk on a property that you have permission to pick some things and bring it back. It's wonderful to have natural materials from your local ecosystem. It helps children to feel connected to it. What is this thing? Oh, that's a fern. That's interesting. Look at the pine cone, or look at the, whatever it is that you've collected in your own ecosystem. In some programs, we do some painted loose parts and natural materials as well. I love the idea of adding some repurposed pieces from an old stove and just add sort of an authentic play to it. Structures for shade could be something like this willow tunnel. You can look up in the toolkit, I'll have the resources for a willow tunnel, and this takes a little bit of time for it to grow out, but what a beautiful space. And children use this in such imaginative and creative ways. Though these kind of more wild forts are also wonderful for children. Even recruiting the help of older kids to help create some little fort or den is really a fun addition to outdoor spaces. This is a picture of a three-sided shelter. I wanted to be able to really still be able to supervise, yet children feel like they're really tucked away. And so I recruited my then 12-year-old son to help me build this kind of rustic structure, and lots of play potential. And really, the cost of this is almost nothing. I think I had to pay for a lunch for him and some rope, and that's about it, because all of the other materials were harvested from our forest. Natural materials to play games, variety of natural materials and loose parts that kids can use in lots of different ways. This was a store that was set up. Something simple like this chip and dip container can, even in your fenced in areas where you're like, oh, I don't have lots of natural materials, even bringing in this kind of quantity of things can really get kids engaged in play. Creating some natural materials that have numbers or letters can be great. Having the outlining of the black against the color, the white, or whatever color you're using, really helps it to pop and stand out. So this set is numerals and also dots. This idea comes from Messy Math, the Messy Math book by Juliet, is it Robertson? Her name is, I'll make sure I put that in the resource list though. And for really small spaces, thinking about how we utilize the fence area. So even adding plexiglass directly to the fence and having a spot where you can bring paint cups out. You could have art, paint directly onto the easel, and then let Mother Nature wash the natural paint or washable paint away. Or you could have paper there that you're using. Another fun thing that we can do on the fence would be, adding gutters so that we could have balls for, ramps and pathways, or in the warmer temperatures, we could use that for like a water wall. But I really think the process of developing your outdoor classroom should be something that is creative and fun. It should be an enjoyable process. I think just jumping in and kind of getting started with what you have, and then eventually start to brainstorm, create yourself a vision map of what you want the space to look like. And it doesn't have to look too fancy. This is an example of one of my students from my college course called Growing Outdoor Classrooms, but they started to imagine what they would really like it to look like. And to create a vision map, you don't need a lot of materials, but I encourage my students to use a poster board or a large pad of easel paper or something big, markers, pencils, rulers. Maybe if you're going to print, if you do have that Pinterest board of all your ideas, you could print some pictures from there, and then just allow some time to create a vision board. And this can really help get all of these ideas that you have from here down, get your creative juices flowing. If you're working, in a space at a childcare center, or at a space where you have coworkers, think about getting them literally on the same page as you, and do a vision map process with them so that you can get your ideas together. And so this is an example of an outdoor classroom vision map that kind of combines drawing as well as photographs of what the person was hoping to implement. And this was a collaborative process to think about how can we tap into community organizations that might help support this process as well. Here's another example of a vision board that this was a childcare center. They printed out pictures. They had different staff members chime in about what they wanted to have in the space. And then they created this vision board and put it in a shared space that all families walked by. And so they had this little appeal letter here, which I've zoomed in on here. Can you help us design an outdoor classroom? We're going to be looking for items to make an awesome outdoor classroom this spring. And then they listed some of the items, and they kind of planted that seed in the winter time. Like, winter time is a great time for visioning and dreaming about what you want to do. And then letting people know what you want and creating even a wish list that goes along with your vision map. What materials do you need? What kind of labor do you need? Organizing an outdoor classroom work day where I like to think about having those both in the spring and the fall so that people come in and help you with all of those spring tasks. So post your vision map, post your wish list somewhere that parents and other people in your community can see so that they can support this vision that you have. You don't want to take all this on by your own self. If you're one person trying to make this giant vision come to life, of course you'd feel overwhelmed. But let other people know what you need, what kind of support you need. Don't forget to ask for volunteers. This is my same son a few years later building a different fort for a community organization that we have called Field Farm and Forest, and it's a primarily outdoor program, but they didn't have a shelter. And so I was like, I know someone who needs for high school community service hours for he'll come and build that for you. And so we went up that day, and he and I and the education director from that program worked on this project together. And just a few hours in, and this beautiful space was set up there. And so volunteers, who can support your program? How can they help? Let people know what you need, whether it's an arborist to bring in some stumps, or a high school kid to help you build a shelter, or just whoever to come and help you rake and kind of freshen up the space. But that becomes part of your sustainability plan. Outdoor learning and outdoor classrooms, we need to let people know about the benefits of it and then invite them in to help us make it into a reality. Same son helping me just a few weeks ago bury my mushroom stumps. These stumps now are 3 years old. They've gotten really dried and they're really light and they were really tippy. And so they were short enough that they didn't need any mulching underneath of it. But because they became so light, they were starting to rock and be a little bit too difficult for my 3-year-olds. So I was like, okay, perfect opportunity to recruit some help. So in summary, please don't get overwhelmed by the obstacles. Just start where you start. I hope today you were able to take away some ideas. And, sometimes we just need that reminder to, don't let funding stop you. If you waited until you had that large grant to create your outdoor classroom, who knows? Maybe that grant's never going to come around. In the toolkit, there is a recording that I have on my YouTube channel all about grant writing for outdoor classrooms. It's a step-by-step. It's going to help you jump in and get started on it, but don't let funding stop you. When we find those obstacles, brainstorm them. One of the obstacles in a program I was working with just recently was like, what, why are we, the barrier was, why are we wasting so much time getting kids dressed? Or why are we wasting so much time on kids getting dressed? And so we're like, well, wait, what are they learning when they're getting dressed? Kids are learning all kinds of things. So what was an obstacle of wasting time? All of a sudden, after brainstorming with them, we were like, oh, wait, there's actually a lot of executive functioning happening here. Kids are learning about sequencing and hand-eye coordination. They're working their little fine motor skills. They're learning all that social emotional stuff of listening and patience and, the resiliency and the perseverance. all kinds of things are happening even during getting dressed. And so when we see an obstacle, try to unpack it and think about, oh, what is happening here? Or what is the value of this thing? Here are some books that I love for outdoor classroom development. I myself don't yet have a book here, that growth mindset, but these are some that I love. The Cultivating Outdoor Classrooms book by Eric Nelson, I find is a really thorough and well-researched one. One that just is beautiful is my friend Rusty Keeler, who has written Natural Playscapes, Creating Outdoor Play Environments for the Soul. It's a beautiful book. I encourage, he's an artist in his addition to just being such an awesome educator, but encourage you to get the paper copy of it. It is a little expensive, and he just announced recently that you can get a digital version. Those of you who have more of an asphalt kind of playground, Sharon Danks has a great book called Asphalt to Ecosystems. And if you're working more in a school age program, like in a public school, this book, Schoolyard Enhanced Learning, is geared more to K through 8. So those are my top 4 books for outdoor classrooms. And I want to finish with the idea of when we are really clear on what our why is, it really helps us to think about what we do and what we prioritize. And so for me, my why is I want kids to feel this deep connection to nature. And that only happens when they have the time and the space and the support of someone who's there helping them do that work. And in summary, I would love for you to keep in touch with me. I do have the free Facebook group called Nature Inspired Teacher. You can use this QR code to go to that group. And when you join the group, if you really want to keep in touch with me, put your email address, as there's 3 questions when you join the group. If you put your email address, you'll be on my weekly newsletter. And I don't spam you. I don't, I'm not trying to really overwhelm you but throughout the year, I share lots of free resources in my emails, my Thursday newsletter email. So I invite you to be a part of that. I do blog over at April's Teaching Tree, and I am on social media, both on Facebook and Instagram. And those are where you can find me. I hope that today you feel that sense of empowerment, that you're excited about your outdoor classroom. And I just appreciate you being here. Thanks so much. Have a great one.